Gettysburg Museum of History Studios. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And today we are talking with our friend, once again, Codie Eash, karaoke star, historian over at the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. And today we are talking about Robert E. Lee. Specifically, It's All My Fault. Well, no Bobby Lee, I wanted to say, with Codie Eash, of course. And welcome back, Codie.
Thanks. You're giving away my karaoke secrets. People are going to start asking me to sing.
You put it on social media. Who's giving away what?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You are a fantastic karaoke performer.
Thank you.
There was a podcast that I used to be friends with back on when I had my old podcast in Jersey. They were called Jam with the Band, and actually the podcast was called the Decomposition Podcast, and they would tell you like the history of a famous song and how they recorded it and how they wrote it and all that stuff, and it was really good. But they had a band, and they would go around and play, and it would be like karaoke with a band, like what you do.
Yeah.
And it seemed really fun. I never did it, but it was a pretty cool thing. I always thought that was a good idea.
That's cool.
Anyway,
we've considered as a 24 hours on the Ridge activity to do some sort of late night like karaoke, but it has to be like Civil War songs.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I like that. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
hey, you know what? We should explore that because I might actually have a guy who could do that.
All right.
Like
cool.
All right.
I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun. All right, but listen, we're here for some serious stuff.
Yes.
And we're talking about Robert E. Lee. Now, everybody knows the famous scene in the movie Gettysburg when Martin Sheen rides out and he goes, "This is all my fault." And then people are like, no. And he goes, "No, friends, hear me. This is all my fault." And no, sir, no. And then there's a whole big drawn out thing. It's all my fault. Wah, wah, wah. Right? Mm-hmm. And the guys are like, "No, we're not going to say that about you. I'd never say that about you. You're the Marble Man and everything." But how much of that is true? How much of that is lost cause stuff? How much of it is whatever? Or Ron Maxwell, throw that in there. What do we know? First of all, I guess, where do we get that story? Who's the first person that tells us this story?
Mm-hmm. So that was the question that I was most interested in sort of pursuing this as a COVID era project. And I was reading one of the old histories of Lee at Gettysburg, Clifford Doughty's or one of those that it just occurred to me, and it had never really before along those lines of how do we know what we know. It occurred to me, where does that line come from? How much do we know about that? And others have, you can find those old Civil War talk message boards, things like that, where people have delved into that. But I started to compile just all the references that I could find in doing some digitized book searches, things like that. And there are different versions of the quote, but the earliest that I could find is from Arthur Fremantle, and it's in his 3 months in the Southern States, which he publishes right when he gets back to England later in 1863. And his initial version is a little different than the most famous version of the line, but this is what he writes. "I saw General Cadmus Wilcox come up to him," meaning Lee, "and explain, almost crying, the state of his brigade. General Lee immediately shook hands with him and said cheerfully, 'Never mind, General, all this has been my fault. It is I that have lost this fight, and you must help me out of it in the best way you can.'" So that's the quote. And then Fremantle goes on to talk about just the general mood of the scenario. "In this manner, I saw General Lee encourage and reanimate his somewhat dispirited troops, and magnanimously take upon his own shoulders the whole weight of the repulse. It was impossible to look at him or listen to him without feeling the strongest admiration, and I never saw any man fail him except the man in the ditch." And so it's a wartime account from this British observer who is the first person to say that he says it, yes, to these Confederate soldiers he's consoling from Pickett's division who've just been repulsed in this attack, but it's specifically to Cadmus Wilcox, who is a figure I don't think we often associate with being part of this story and how we think about that moment today. And then right after the war, it becomes especially popularized by Edward Pollard, who is most famous as a Southern historian in that immediate post-war period for popularizing the term the lost cause. It's something that a lot of people like to say is some sort of modern creation of people who are opposing a certain version of Confederate memory. But in reality, it's a term that is created by a Confederate sympathizer right after the war. And in 1867, in one of his incredibly influential post-war works, he, based on, I'm not sure what source he's looking at, maybe he's read Fremantle's account or interviewed a Confederate veteran, he quotes, General Lee is reported to reply, "Never mind, General, this is all my fault, and you young men must help me out of it." Longstreet quotes a similar line in his memoir, From Manassas to Appomattox in 1896. Walter Taylor, Lee's chief of staff, his chief aide, in 1906, so we're getting into the 20th century, when the troops that took part in the assault of the third day were returning to our lines, he rode in their midst, calling upon them to reform, and addressing General Pickett, he exclaimed, "Get your men together, General. They did nobly. It is all my fault." So it's possible Lee says this on a couple of occasions. Does he say it to Wilcox and then to Pickett? Does the story just sort of change over time, that people are remembering Pickett as being central to this story because the charge is now increasingly named after him by that point? Nevertheless, it seems like it's something that he certainly says, or some version of it, that we see ultimately play out in The Killer Angels. And then I think to most people today, as with so many things related to Gettysburg, they mostly associate it, their first understanding of that this was said at all, probably with seeing it on screen in the movie Gettysburg.
So with the Wilcox one, it's interesting because Wilcox was his brigade that shattered? Like that he would have been because he was late in the action on July 3rd, right? He had some fighting on the 2nd. But how bad, Mike, do you know off the top of your head their casualties?
Not off the top of my head, and I don't have it here. I know one of the hard parts about Wilcox and the Florida Brigade are having to go over that same ground that they went over the day before. And you know how demoralizing that must have been.
Sure, yeah.
And this probably also, as you're looking that up, Matt, probably also ties in with that age-old debate over, how much is Lee even familiar with his casualty numbers of especially July 1st, but July 2nd as well, where we have those multiple accounts that he's realizing either on July 3rd or after that his previous 2 days casualty numbers are just that much worse than he initially suspected.
Is it Scales' brigade that he talks to before the charge and says, my God, like, is this all we have left? Or I remember these men having more, or something to that effect. I don't remember the quote.
Something like that. I don't know if it is Scales' brigade, but I feel like it's around where they were.
Yeah, it's one of the first day attackers at the seminary that he doesn't realize that they've lost as many as they have. And it's interesting because on that side of things we see Joseph Brown, who is a veteran of the 14th South Carolina, and he'll write after the war. He returns in 1882, and he says that he always felt that Confederates had a harder challenge successfully taking Seminary Ridge July 1st than they had unsuccessfully taking Cemetery Ridge on July 3rd, which I thought was always an interesting way to phrase that. So
basically it was just like a slaughter on July 3rd.
On July 1st, even more so, and they were successful in taking that position. But July 3rd, of course, becomes the more...
No, but I mean, in July 3rd, there wasn't much fighting.
Oh, yes.
It was just, they got, okay, here we go, Wilcox. I skipped it before. All right, so he came in with 1726, and he lost 778. So, a good number. Yeah. 45, almost half, 45.1%.
Yep. Not
according to
Godfrey,
Godfrey.
Of course.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. But, I mean, I guess, that's a good chunk of your men there.
Of course, and it's one of those things, too, where... if we were able to hover over Lee's shoulder, is he possibly saying this just to all the brigade commanders? And this is just the one who Fremantle happens to witness, and Taylor witnesses him say this to Pickett. It's one of those things where, how many times is he saying this line?
Yeah.
Is it potentially that he's just repeating this to everybody, no matter their loss or his understanding of their loss?
I would imagine, though, that so we don't question that he said it. We have enough independent sources that say he did, right? Okay, yeah. So that's not even
trusted people who we know are definitely with him, or in the case of Pollard, someone who, say what we will about the conclusions he comes to in terms of Confederate memory and the lost cause version of it, but he does his legwork to understand the events of places where he was not. So these are all trusted eyewitnesses or historians of the era.
Yeah. Okay. So he said it. So that's not in question here. Okay.
Yep.
Now the question is, though, First of all, do we believe that he believed that? And I think we do, right? Because he resigns or tries to resign.
Yeah. So I think there are two ways distinctly to look at this. Is one, does Lee believe it then at that moment? And I think the answer is yes, as you said, at least up until the time that he attempts to resign. And the second piece of that is, do others believe that that's the case? Are others blaming Lee? Or are they saying what those soldiers do in the scene in the movie? No, this wasn't you. We failed you. So a couple of examples where there are these distinct Confederate criticisms of Lee, where they say the buck has to stop with him. He is responsible ultimately, even if other officers are not carrying out his orders the way he had hoped, even if soldiers are just not able to take these positions because of a numbers game, whatever it might be. There's a period of time where from the battle as it's happening until a few months later, really that winter is a big period of 1863-64, where clearly people are saying, yes, you are to blame. So a couple of examples here, one from each day I'll give everybody. Richard Ewell, Corps commander, of course. This is post-war, but he's looking back on how he remembered feeling about the events of July 1st. When, of course, he's infamously told, take the hill if practicable, according to Lee's post-battle report, which isn't filed until January of 1864. So even that is not necessarily a contemporary, right in the moment, how Lee felt about things. So Ewell says, I know I have been blamed by many for not having pressed my advantage the first day at Gettysburg, but then I cannot see why I should be censured. General Lee came upon the ground before I could possibly have done anything. And after surveying the enemy's positions, he did not deem it advisable to attack.
What does he mean he came upon the ground before I could have done anything? So he's not saying that Lee went and scouted out Culp's Hill.
I don't think he means that. I think he means he is closer to being able to observe that position.
Oh, I see.
Than Ewell was. So Ewell is still, moving with his corps through the town. Lee, I suppose what he's saying is Lee is up at Seminary Ridge, can see Cemetery and Culp's Hill in the distance before I ever have the opportunity to understand where that is. I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Arthur Freemantle, July 2nd, which I guess we can make the point what I'm about to read is not necessarily a criticism, but it is an observation that people could easily criticize. And the gist here, as we'll see, is Freemantle is noticing that Lee is hands off, which some people see as a benefit as a commander, that he is able to give discretionary orders. But on the flip side, one could make the argument, well, you have two corps commanders who are brand new to this job. You're not dealing with Stonewall Jackson and James Longstreet anymore. Ewell and Hill, they need a little bit more directives, as Ewell just said in that first account we heard. Freemantle notices this, and many people, I'm sure, are familiar with the story of Freemantle and Justice Scheibert, the observer from Prussia, is sitting in a tree on the seminary campus near Lee's headquarters. And on July 2nd, he says, Lee only sent one message and received one report. This is as the fighting is happening. Freemantle sees Lee receive one message and send one response. It is evidently his system to arrange the plan thoroughly with the three corps commanders and then leave to them the duty of modifying and carrying it out to the best of their abilities. So again, not necessarily a criticism, but viewed a certain way by a Ewell, by, after the war, a Longstreet. I think people will take that as, okay, maybe he needs to exhibit a stronger leadership style here than what he does when the shooting actually starts. And the third one is from an unidentified Confederate lieutenant who is serving as a guard at the seminary hospital. Hundreds of patients have already made their way inside Schmucker Hall at the seminary, today home to Seminary Ridge Museum. And Elijah Rice Reed is one of those wounded soldiers. He's a private in the 2nd Wisconsin Iron Brigade veteran. And he goes up into the cupola on July 3rd. We don't know when he writes this. It's right after the war, though. It's this contemporary memoir that's undated, but it's right after the war as best we can tell. And he says that he's there with this Confederate lieutenant who, after seeing the repulsive Pickett's charge at a distance, like the pent-up thunders in the earth beneath, he broke forth in a raging torrent of long-suppressed wrath. Imagine, if you can, an enraged southern fire eater pouring out volcanic clouds of vigorous and vehement volumes of profanity. This is where Lee comes in. He called Lee a fool, and with all the profane adverbs and adjectives qualifying fool, for undertaking to dislodge George Meade from that position over there. Then he quotes the man as saying, he can't do it, meaning Lee. He knows he can't do it. Why in hell does he try to do it?
As Addressing Gettysburg celebrates its 8th year, bringing Gettysburg to you in unique and creative ways, we want to take this moment to thank our patrons. The only reason we've been able to last this long is because our patrons have supported our efforts since 2019. And we can do a lot more if you join the ranks of the original Gettys nerds by going to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. Oh, and you can hear the rest of this episode over there too.